of audience in front of you. It also strikes that emotional, inspirational chord with the audience. So the second myth that I want to bust is don't focus so much time asking yourself, will this topic win me the competition? Ask yourself, am I zooming in and zooming out at the right level to draw the right insight that captures all my audience? So it's not just about the topic, it's about the core message behind it. The last and final tip that I want to leave you with today is a lot of us focus so much on the magnitude of the story or example that we put into our speech. But it's not magnitude that appeals to the audience. It's how much does that example relate to them that connects with the audience. Now, have you ever wondered when you see great achievers, have you ever wondered, but I don't have such achievements in my life, so what do I speak about? I haven't traveled around the world. I haven't traveled to 200 countries. I have not lost loved ones, touch wood. But so what do I talk about? Everybody seems to have a tragic story. Everybody seems to have a huge achievement. The mistake that we do is we think magnitude, the huge, if 500 people die in a speech, that's a speech that wins the competition. In truth, the best of speeches don't focus on the magnitude of what happens in the story. It focuses on how does it relate or connect to the audience. Now, in my example, in my speech called The Scratch in 2015, I remember having an example that speaks about the tragedy that happened during the Second World War, where millions and millions of people died in the battle. A few minutes before the competition, I observed an incident that happened just outside the convention center in Las Vegas, where the convention was happening. Here, there was a sergeant at arms standing outside the large conference room, and he was trying to let people in a streamlined manner so that people don't rush into the auditorium. But people were abusing him. And because everybody wanted to get the first row, they all wanted to sit in the front. And I could literally see a tear in his eye. So a few minutes before my speech, I took out the example of World War II and replaced it with the example of what I just saw. Because my core purpose was to let the audience know that we end up hurting other people without our own knowledge. Now, in terms of magnitude, which is a bigger effect? Is it 20 million people dying, or is it one poor sergeant at arms feeling a little bad about himself? Of course, 20 million people dying is a much more tragic event to the world. But do you know what happened? When I told the audience that, have you ever hurt somebody, probably a sergeant at arms 20 minutes ago, I got a 10-second applause from them, which even the World War II example had never given me in the previous levels. Why do you think I got that? Because they were able to relate to the example. They may sympathize with the victims of World War II, but they don't relate to it because it was too far ago. But they relate to this because this happened 10 minutes before, and they were involved in it. And so they felt guilty when I gave that example. Even your iPhone falling down and getting scratched may connect with the audience much more than you coming up with some dramatic tragedy of something happening to somebody. So the third point is focus on what relates to my audience. What connects with them now? What would they feel guilty about if I talk about it? Now, you may feel more guilty if I talk about having that extra sweet or dessert that you're not supposed to have, especially if you're more at home because of the coronavirus that's going on now. That may connect with you more than me talking about something huge that you may not relate to. Just to summarize the 3 points, after which we will open it up for questions and answers. 1, focus on the music, the output, not so much about the notes, which are the input. So public speaking is not about whether you have your input right. It's about whether your output is right for the audience. The experience, the music is what that matters. After my session today, if you come and tell me, Aditya, your hand gestures were awesome, I've lost the plot, because you were focusing on the notes and not the message, the experience of having heard me. So if you come and tell me, Aditya, there was a terrific takeaway from your speech, that is what constitutes as success. The second point was focus more on the insight that you're deriving from the message, not so much about the topic. Any topic can win you the world championship of public speaking, depending on whether you're able to zoom in and zoom out at the right level to draw up the right insight from that speech. And the third point, my friends, is don't worry if you don't have dramatic, large incidents in your life to speak about. The best of speeches, the best of Toastmaster and non-Toastmaster speeches have come from the most relatable, everyday incidents. So keep a lookout on what's happening today. And I can bet from the time you woke up this morning till now, 6:20 p.m. in Philippines, you've had at least 3 experiences that is worthy for you to win the world championship with. But sometimes we don't notice them because we think speeches are won because of massive, huge experiences that people have. So let me pause here with this recap. And I would love to spend as much time as possible that we have left on taking as many questions as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Toastmaster Aditya. I think wisdom in small doses is much more digestible, I feel, because it's like giving us the time to breathe and say, okay, we take in this wisdom. So now what do we get out of it? So I love the idea of doing this. Gives us also the room for us to actually think more, because all ideas in a 45-hour session or a 30-hour session sometimes may not be totally dissolved. So love the idea, Toastmaster Aditya. Thank you so much for that. All right, now, with that note, I'm going to take the spotlight off Toastmaster Aditya for a moment now. Okay. And the spotlight now is on anyone who wishes to ask questions. But before that, you can start raising your hands, but I would like to first invite our first reactor for today to react on his feedback of the session as of now, and also to kickstart the Q&A session with your question. Can I now invite Toastmaster Mike Shane to join us? You can unmute yourself. Yes, Toastmaster Mike Shane, the spotlight is on you now. Please go ahead.
So good evening to all of our District 75 Toastmasters and our guests, and of course our speaker. I just want to thank you for giving your insight today and your wisdom that you have shared with us. It was a refreshing way to look at not just how to win contests, but how to give effective speeches in general. Oftentimes in Toastmasters, we do seem to focus on the notes rather than the music. I really love that analogy because it really does tie into what I see a lot in myself and in other Toastmasters as well. We do focus on the fundamentals of speech, public speaking quite a bit, and we forget about sometimes that the message and getting that message across in the right way where somebody can accept it is really the purpose of what we're trying to do. And so that analogy made a lot of sense, and I really appreciate that. Focus on the music and not the notes. I think that's something that we can all learn a great deal from. Your second point about the topics don't win contests is also just as greatly important to delivering a good message, whether it be for a contest or for any speech where we want to try to motivate, we want to try to convince somebody of our opinion, in a work setting or in a Toastmaster setting. The message itself is what's most important, and that was shown through in the message that you gave us today, because your message was right on target to really help us improve as Toastmasters and as public speakers. So the third part that you talked about, relating the message to something that somebody can understand. I know as beginning speech writers and as beginning speakers, a lot of times we do focus on research of information that we can throw into our speeches in order to make them sound more more researched or more knowledgeable about the subject that we're talking about. And a lot of times that does take it away from what people can relate to. By making our speeches more relatable and our messages more relatable, we for sure can get the engagement of our audience to a higher level and be more effective as a speaker. So those three topics that you gave us today, three suggestions that you gave us today, were right on target to help us improve what we're doing as Toastmasters. So once again, I thank you for that. To start off the question and answer portion, I would like to ask you how competing in contests has changed your focus as a public speaker, or especially competing in an international competition. How did that help you improve? And what would you say the differences in your speaking abilities now as compared to what they were before you started competing in Toastmaster contests?
Thank you, Mike, for that question. Thanks for the brilliant summary that you did. Sometimes the summaries are even better than the full session. So yours was one such. So I've been a Toastmaster for close to 15 years now, and my first 7 years in Toastmasters were mostly in leadership roles. I was a club officer, I was a conference convener, I was a district officer, but then I ended up moving cities often, traveling on work. So I took a break in my Toastmasters leadership journey and jumped into the competitions in 2014. And 2014 was my first experience in Kuala Lumpur at the international convention. And then I came back in 2015 and then 17 in Vancouver as well at the finals of the World Championship. Now, I've realized that over these years, one of the reasons that lures me towards competing is the fact that competitions are shortcuts to learning. You see, what you normally learn in 2 or 3 years in Toastmasters by doing your speeches once in 3 months or taking up a role once in 2 months, a competition forces you to accelerate that learning process. And before you know, you've become a much better speaker than you began with. And all in a matter of 6 months. So I found that in myself in 2014, for example, when I started off at the club level to when I finished at the World Championship, I found myself a much more confident person, a much more relaxed person on stage. And then that's the reason I wanted to come back the next year, because I thought this seems to be a shortcut in becoming a better person. What I had learned as a public speaker for 7 years before that in Toastmasters was doubled or tripled in those 2 years between 2014 and 15. So the changes that I see myself today, Mike, is a much higher degree of comfort when I'm on stage and trying to provide the audience with the music and not necessarily with those fundamentals or notes that you spoke about. But I just want to clarify as well. There is no music in the world that does not comprise of notes. Music in itself is notes, but the trick of a good musician is to allow the audience to not get distracted by the notes, but only hear the music. And that's the trick that we're all striving to do more of.
Thank you so much to our first reactor, Toastmaster Mike, for your question. And also, thank you so much, Toastmaster Aditya. All right, next we have our second reactor who will also react to the session and followed by a question. Can I invite our Division F Director, Toastmaster April? If you're there, you can unmute yourself. Toastmaster April, I'm going to help you unmute. Hold on a second. All right, I have unmuted you. There seems to be trouble unmuting you, Toastmaster April. All right, we will keep that for later then. And we'll go ahead. Anyone has a question, if you can raise your virtual hand where I can see it, I'll let you ask the question to Toastmaster Aditya.
And feel
While we
free to.
do so, can I request our division K director, Toastmaster Ed?
Yes, Toastmaster Rafi.
Yes, if you can ask the question, please.
Okay. I have a question for Toastmaster Aditya. So this is my question, Toastmaster Aditya. How do you make your message global in your speech? And considering that we all came from diverse cultural background in Toastmasters.
Thanks for the question, Division Director, because that's truly a question that we face when we go outside of our countries or outside of our culture and still need to appeal to the global audience. You see, there are some cultural values that are very different across the world. And what could be a very emotional and a passionate speech that won you in your division or in your area may not elicit the same amount of emotion or applause at an international level. Not because your speech isn't good, because that particular example may not be relevant to them. I learned that in 2014 when I competed at the international convention. One of the things that got reaffirmed as a belief for me is the fact that there are some fundamental human emotions that are common to everybody across the world, irrespective of your country, your religion, your orientation, your ethnicity, it doesn't matter. Gender. There are some fundamental emotions, and a few examples of those are everybody likes to feel special. Everybody likes to feel loved. Now, this is true across the world. Number two, everybody loves compliments. Everybody loves to feel good. Number three, everybody likes to contribute, to add value in what they take up. Value does not always need to be money. Value could be in any way, but people like to play a role. Number four, everybody likes to have a good circle, a family or friend circle around them. So these are all fundamental needs or emotions that unite all of us as human beings in the world. Now, the trick is to make your speech relevant to a global audience, is ask yourself, am I tapping into some fundamental values or emotions that human beings face? Not just whether Americans face or people in the Philippines face or in India face. It's am I connecting the global community called human beings? Now, when your message taps into one of these common emotions, then it always works irrespective of where you go. However, you may still need to have stories or examples or jokes that are not too country specific too. So the best way to do that is take those examples and try to have a conversation with somebody outside of your community and see whether it works. But the starting point to ask is, what are some of those emotions that people across the world connect with?
Thank you, Toastmaster Aditya.
Welcome.
All right. Thank you, Toastmaster Ed, and thank you, Toastmaster Aditya. All right. We just had actually, I would say, a stream of questions coming in, but somehow our attendees are shy, I suppose. They have not raised hands. They have in fact asked me to ask you the questions. Right. We have one hand raised, Toastmaster John Todorowicz. I acknowledge that. I will ask the questions based on the order that it has been sent to me.
Sure.
All right. I would like to start off with one of our attendees here. It's Toastmaster Danny Agapai. Toastmaster Danny Agapai. We have a question from Toastmaster Dagmara Elminoweska. Toastmaster Dagmara, you were first in order. I would like to ask this question to Toastmaster Aditya, coming from Toastmaster Dagmara. The question is, should I leave the most profound experience for the speech content? And there is a follow-up to that. It says, is using the same experience for a regular speech and the contest speech acceptable? So there are two questions. The first part of it says, should I leave the most profound experience for the speech content? And then the next question says, should I use the same experience for a regular speech or a contest speech?
My offer to all of you is, a speech is a speech. whether it be a speech in a contest or a speech in a project, one of the things that I've learned after being a Toastmaster for such a long time is that you learn that, especially after you won these titles and once you get these accolades, is that once you've created a brand for yourself, people look up to you and they don't care whether it's a contest speech or a casual conversation. They expect you to put in your 100%. They expect that quality out of you. So excellence is the ability to be at your best, irrespective of whether you have an audience of 5 people or an audience of 5,000 people, because it is your name, your brand as an audience, not about where you're speaking. So if you have a story that is worthy of passing on to an audience, don't really bother whether it's a contest speech or a regular speech. Go ahead with it. Now, in a contest speech, you got to be extra careful because you're now compared to 9 other people who are going to bring their best experiences as well. So you may want to spend a little more time on polishing, cutting, having the right gimmicks and all of that. But as a speaker, my invitation to you is don't differentiate what platform you're speaking on. A good speech should be the only speech that you deliver in your life.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Toastmaster Aditya, and thank you, Toastmaster Dagmara from District 71, UK. If I read it correctly, thank you for that question. We do have more questions. I'm going to go in the order that it has been asked, and allow me to keep my video on pause because I'm using my handheld device. So I don't want the device to be showing you the background, which I don't want you to see. All right.
Now we're curious.
All right. The next question was asked here by Toastmaster Julius. Toastmaster Julius, you wanted to ask the question, if I'm correct, right? So if you're there, you can unmute yourself and please ask your question to Toastmaster Aditya. Toastmaster Julius.
Yeah. First, Toastmaster Aditya, I would like to thank you for the very helpful tips.
Toastmaster Julius, please, you need to speak up a little more louder. We are unable to hear you clearly.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yeah, go ahead, Julius.
Can you hear me well now?
Yeah, go ahead. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you once again, Toastmaster Aditya, for your very helpful tips, truly value adding, and those were very clean cut, very concise, but very impactful tips, I would say. So thank you once again. My question is, there are basically 2 different schools of thought in terms of preparing for a speech. On one hand, a group of people would recommend that you memorize your speech word for word, so as not to lose, so as to eliminate the probability of forgetting your speech and forgetting the words. But the drawback seems to be that you come to be less flexible or less spontaneous. On the other hand, another school of thought is you just memorize the key points of your speech and try to be more flexible in terms of the temperament of the audience, and in a way be spontaneous in adapting to the temperament of the audience during the time of your speech. What are your thoughts on these 2 schools of thought, and which would you recommend from your wealth of experience?
Right. Thank you, Julius, for that very pertinent question for all of us as public speakers, isn't it? Now, the luxury of these 2 choices that you've given us, Julius, exists only if your speech is, say, less than 10 minutes. Because if you're going to speak for 2 hours, you anyway cannot write word to word. It's going to be very difficult for you to write 50 pages word to word. When you have a speech like a Toastmaster speech, which is 5 to 7 minutes, then you have a choice of either writing word to word or doing some kind of a mind mapping exercise. But I just want to tell the audience that soon, if you're invited to do a workshop or for 1 hour or 2 hours, you don't have the luxury of going word to word, because you cannot really by heart a 40-page document. So with respect to a Toastmaster speech, as Julius asked, is it better to go word by word or better to keep a broad idea in your mind? I would really answer that question depending on where in your learning journey you are. If your focus at the moment is to get over the fear of public speaking, right? Then you're looking for a painkiller. You're not looking for a vitamin because your problem is to get over a fear. Then I would suggest it's okay to write down your speech word to word so that that is not a tension in your head when you're on stage. But if you're in Toastmasters for a few years, or if you've joined Toastmasters already as a good speaker, then I would urge you to experiment, to surprise yourself by not writing word to word, but just writing the key points. This is what I'm going to start with. This is the main story, and this is the message I want to convey. And then trust yourself that you have good enough vocabulary and confidence that you can make sentences out of those ideas on the spot. That doesn't mean you're going unprepared. You're just going partially prepared because you're trusting yourself with the vocabulary and the language. But that's more of a vitamin solution. If you're already good, if you have the confidence, then surprise yourself. The last thing you want to do is be in Toastmasters for 10 years, having learned everything, but yet being very risk averse and preparing every speech. There will be a point in your Toastmasters journey where you want to start experimenting more than just writing every word in your speech. But remember, if you have joined Toastmasters to firstly get over the fear, then don't allow the script to add more fear on your mind. So it's okay to write your script complete. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Toastmaster Aditya. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Toastmaster Julius, and thank you, Toastmaster Aditya, for answering that question. Toastmaster Aditya, how many more questions shall we take before you resume your session again? Can we have another 2?
Yeah, go ahead. I don't mind infusing some of my points inside the questions itself. So we can do questions, answers till the end. I'm okay with that.
Excellent. All right. We have another question in the order that it was asked by Toastmaster Vicky Wilson, representing District 90. Toastmaster Vicky wanted me to ask on her behalf. You talked about dividing the stage into 3 parts. If that was your question, if I'm correct, Toastmaster Vicky, right? Yeah. So you talked about dividing the stage into 3 parts. Toastmaster Vicky would like to know more about that, if you can explain further.
I mentioned that to poke fun on the typical rules that we are taught as Toastmasters, as cast on stone, as gospel truth, right? But all those are notes. But let's focus more on this point as Vicky has asked this question. Now, when you have the luxury of stage, a typical a Toastmaster guideline is to use the stage space, and that becomes important. But when these are taken as just rules because your mentor said so, as a speaker, you haven't understood why you're doing what you're doing. Now, if you are walking across the stage, or if you're using a particular type of voice modulation, and I ask you, why are you doing that? And you tell me, Aditya, that's because that's a Toastmaster thing. That's a rule that we all follow. Then you don't know why you're doing what you're doing. My invitation to you, Vicky, and all of you is ask yourself, what is the principle behind this rule? That this rule is satisfying, which means if my mentor asks me to divide the stage into 3 parts, which means I'm going to talk about my childhood, and I'm going to take a few steps to the right side. So I'm creating a visual imagery of childhood on stage. And I'm going to talk about my future, my aspirations on the left side of the stage. And the narrator in me is going to be in the middle of the stage. Now you've got to ask yourself, why are you doing that? The principle behind that rule may be so that the audience has more clarity about your speech. The audience connect with you more, because when they know you, if you go to the right side, you're going to talk about your childhood. If you go to the left, you're going to talk about your future aspirations. Now, if you're connected to the principle, then you can start making up your own rules. I love making up my own rules in public speaking because I try to connect to why I'm doing what I'm doing. And when the principle is clear, all of these rules are automatic byproducts. So just to clarify your question, Vicky, dividing the stage into 3 parts is not really a rule, but it's the principle behind that is if you have too many characters in your speech or too many incidents in your speech, the audience may get a little confused about what you're trying to say. You know your characters well, but the audience may get confused. So if you divide the stage as per characters or as per emotions, and you say my positive emotions will be here, my negative emotions will be here, or in any way, if you divide the stage, it may add more clarity to your audience.
Excellent. Thank you, Toastmaster Aditya, for answering that. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of questions coming in, right, in the order that it was asked. The next question was asked by Toastmaster Danny Agapai. Toastmaster Danny wanted me to ask on his behalf. All right, the question is, Toastmaster Danny wants to know, what do you do if during your speech you feel that you've actually lost connection with the audience? So as a speaker, what do you do if during your speech you feel that you've lost connection with your audience?
Thanks, Danny, for that question. And I'm sure that's a question which all of us on the call at some point would be petrified about, irrespective of how good or bad or how famous or infamous a speaker you are. That's the last thing that you want on stage. Let's analyze that a little more, just because the question is so relevant to as public speakers. Danny's question is interesting because he did not say, what if you forget your speech? He said, what if you lose connection with the audience? And that's a terrific question. Forgetting your speech is something which you can get over with practice. But even great speakers sometimes in the middle of the presentations feel they've lost connection with the audience. Now let's see what connection means. Have you ever been in the middle of a speech where you've seen a couple of people take their phones out, or you know people are zoning out? What do you do at those times? There are 2 tips. I mean, this could be a long 1-hour session by itself, but I'm going to leave you with 2 tips that may help you in these situations. One is, when you're preparing the speech, leave spaces, blank spaces, which you can fill up when you're on stage. Let me explain. The way I like to prepare speeches is always leaving spaces in between where I can relate on stage to what's happening at the moment, or to the conference theme, or to something that happened that morning. So when I'm leaving spaces, I'm always also including what's happening currently with the audience. For example, I may tell in my speech in the middle, I was wearing a blue color shirt that day, just like Mr. Richard is wearing today. You know what I'm saying? That just like what Mr. Richard is wearing today cannot be scripted, because Mr. Richard might have worn some other dress, shirt that day. So try to include what's happening at that moment in your speech by leaving little spaces in your speech. Of course, this could seem like a very advanced technique, but it works if you experiment a couple of times. When you do that, when you're involving what's happening at the moment, the audience never lose connection, because it's not just a narration, but you're involving the audience. The second tip that may help you in these situations, Danny, right? Yeah, Danny, is it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to even smile and tell your audience that, you know what, I think I'm losing you guys. Or it's okay to pause and ask a question. Some of the times in even table topics, when I feel that I'm losing connection or I'm losing my own flow of thoughts, I just pause and ask a question. So what do you think about this topic? I don't expect an answer, but just asking a question makes it more lively with the audience. So it's okay to be vulnerable. Your audience in Toastmasters are there to support you. Befriend your audience, don't alienate your audience, and you should be fine.
Thank you, Toastmaster Danny, for the question, and thank you, Toastmaster Aditya. We now have Toastmaster April, whom we are trying to allow her to ask a question. Toastmaster April, if you're able to unmute yourself now Go ahead with your
Hi.
question.
Yeah. Hi. And I would just like to first commend Division K for this initiative. Also, I'd like to thank the speaker for his sharing. This is a very good tool to be connected with everyone. I'm just blown away by the essence of what you shared, of the notes and the music and the whole song. And I think you basically tackled most of what I wanted to ask. Just this one thing, how did you decide to change the example from the World War II victims to the Sergeant at Arms? How confident were you with your intuition? I don't know. How confident are you with that act of changing that example to the other? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, April. Thank you for the kind words and thank you for the question. Now, I thought I was a fool because 15 minutes before the World Championship is when I took the call of doing that. And this is a competition you've been working on for many months from the club level, and 15 minutes ago I did that. At that moment, I just felt that was the right thing to do, April, because I thought, all right, I'm giving this great example of 20 million people being massacred. It's fine. But none of these people were involved in it. People theoretically understand it, cognitively understand it, but they have not lived that experience. Now, this example of them behaving badly with the Sergeant at Arms is something very small, but they have been through it themselves. So it just made more sense for me to leverage that example that just happened there. Now, a lot of speakers do similar stuff. Some speakers love to take some cues from the previous speaker's speech. Some people love to ask what the conference theme is and try to, build upon that. So when I saw this happening, I thought, wow, this example fits with my speech, because my speech, April, that year was called the Scratch. And what I was trying to say is that with or without our knowledge, we end up scratching each of us emotionally. And a scratch stays only as long as you don't polish it. And they had scratched the Sergeant at Arms 15 minutes ago. None of them had scratched anybody in World War II. They were not even alive. So it was just an impromptu decision that I took. Luckily, it worked well. But that does not mean it's the advice I give all of you. Again, it depends on where in your learning journey are you. If you feel you're confident that you can carry it off, hey, go for it. If you feel a little nervous about it, maybe you want to experiment bit by bit and not at the finals World Championship stage at the first time. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Toastmaster April, and thank you, Toastmaster Aditya. I have also Toastmaster George, if you are there. I believe you wanted to ask a question.
Hi, George. How are you doing?
Toastmaster George, are you there? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ask Toastmaster. The next one raising hand was Toastmaster John Todorovich. Are you there, sir? If you are, please unmute yourself and go ahead with your question.
Hi, John.
Hi, it's nice to see you in person. Oh, sorry. This question is fairly relatable to what Toastmaster Vicky asked you. It's more related to body language and putting it into practice. We learn as Toastmasters that especially in speeches, we need to be purposeful with our body language, with our facial expressions. At that level of professional speaking that you are right now, how do you avoid becoming too mechanical or too rehearsed? Because I've seen hundreds of championship speeches from district level all the way to the champion for the past 20 years. And some of them seemed, the ones that did not win, some of them seemed a bit too mechanical at the point where you move to this point of the stage and this is what you gesture and this is what you do with your face. How do you still make it look like it's conversational yet maintaining the purposefulness of that body language?
What an excellent question. Thank you, John. And you've been very kind to the winners. I'm sure a lot of winners too sometimes look mechanical. It's not just the people who didn't get there. So a lot of times you find even the world champions in many years were too robotic or mechanical or very over purposeful. It's useful to be purposeful, but the purpose cannot get lost or diluted in the mechanics of speaking itself, isn't it? Now, that's also been one of the learnings in my journey, John. When I look back at my speech in 2014 today, I look back and wonder, why was I so self-conscious on stage? Why was I trying to make it into a dramatic monologue instead of just connecting with the audience? And after 2014, John, I started asking myself a question. If I were to tell this story to a friend over coffee, how would I be saying it? And I try to replicate that emotion, that, that spirit, that energy onto preparing a speech. So if you compare my speech, which is on YouTube, from 2014 to 2017, you would find a world of difference in just the way I speak. You might have observed, John, in the last 40 minutes or so that I'm speaking, my hands do move. My voice is modulating, but my focus is not on that anymore. I'm not saying, hi, John, how are you? It's not so much about that. It's about using your hands to create impact and not having the focus there. Now, one of the ways in which you can do that is to ensure that you have somebody, a non-Toastmaster especially, if possible, to call the bluff of it early on. Now, I used to ask myself, I give so many speeches, and I'm talking about 10 years ago. I used to give so many speeches in Toastmasters, but I used to be a little ashamed to show those videos to my non-Toastmaster friends, especially my friends who know me from my school days, because I know they would laugh and say, why are you being so dramatic? So the challenge that I took for myself, John, is whatever speech I make at Toastmasters, would I be able to proudly put that up on YouTube or show it to my family and friends, and they too feel great after watching that speech? Which means you should be the same person at Toastmasters and outside Toastmasters when you're on stage making a speech. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster John, and thank you, Toastmaster Aditya. We have now a hand raised by distinguished Toastmaster Vinod Panikar, representing District 105. DTM Vinod, if you can hear me, sir, you can unmute yourself and go ahead with the question.
Hi, Toastmaster Rafiq. Hey, Aditya, great. Am I audible, Rafiq?
You are audible, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, a great job, Division K. It's 3 here in Dubai. I'm sitting in Dubai. And like what you said, I wanted to see Adityan because I had heard him before. I have 2 questions for you, Adityan. One is, a lot of speeches, and I am talking not as a speaker's perspective, from a district leader or a division leader perspective. We see a lot of speakers, 90% of them, still giving speeches with titles like power of mind, self-confidence, and all these things that the time itself they give the title, we are off. Okay, that is one thing. Along with that, you spoke about zooming in the message, in your own message, and you gave a very good example of the blood donation and changing it into what are you contributing to the society. So that was a very nicely done, like it changed the complete perspective. So do you have any process, or you suggest a book, or you have a YouTube video where we can see that, okay, can we zoom more into our existing speech? That is my first question.
Thank you, Vinod, for the question, and thank you for joining in from District 105. I have fond memories of speaking at District 105 more than once. So the the response to your question, Vinod, would be the way I prepare my speeches, I clearly demarcate topic, message, and title are three different things for me. They're never the same. But I do find that a lot of us in Toastmasters think all of it is the same, isn't it? Topic, message, and title. Now, the topic in this example of blood donation is just what you're talking about, and that's blood donation. The core message is what are you trying to pull out, extract as insight and offer the audience, which is what are we giving of ourselves to people around us. The title is just what do you want to call as the headline of your speech. And that's like a headline in a newspaper. You want it to be attractive. You want it to be slick. You want the audience to already raise, lean forward and listen to your speech more. So the title is this sexy, short, 3-4 word statement, which need not be the topic. If I give a speech on blood donation and call it blood donation, oh my goodness, that's probably the most boring title ever. And some of the examples you gave, the power of mind, people are already, wow. The reason is they all have a perspective on the power of mind. Or if they really want to learn about power of mind, they would go to a world-renowned brain scientist or a neuroscientist to learn about it. Why would they want to learn from a random person who probably does not have too much expertise on it? So the title need not be the topic. The title needs to be attractive. So in this example of blood donation, what could be a good title? Let's think about it. I have no idea. Let's think about it. Now the title could be what are you waiting for? It's a little provocative, isn't it? It's a question. It is provocative. What are you waiting for is a nice title. Or it could be something like who will help you? It's a powerful title. So if you don't give of yourself, are you going to get in return? So all I'm trying to say is that the topic, title, and message are three different things. And don't get confused with.
Thank you very much. You made it very crystal clear. One more question, and this is something little bit related to the contest. Now, year on year, what we see is many contestants prepare their speech, but they lose out on judging. Now, I am not going to talk about judging over here much, but what I want to hear about you is it a responsibility or is it a part of a speech contest that a contestant need to make him more visible? Because I have observed that sometimes a speaker is too good objectively, but just because the judges have not heard him much before and they go to someone who have heard him much before, means in a way we have one during the judges training, the bias are there. So no matter what happens, we see that a lot, and not only here, we see it around the world. I have heard from been fortunate to, like what you say, Ramona, Manoj Vasudevan, Dhananjay, most of them, whenever they were here, even DTM Balraj, our past international president, I took an interview of his. So I always ask this question, why are you not doing something to improve the quality of judging, create a path, or do rigorous training? What is your take on that? Should a contestant make sure he's more visible before any contest?
Right. Thanks, Vinod. Very, very intricate questions. Good. I like these questions. So let's understand that there are two kinds of competitions in this world. Say one is like a tennis match. In a tennis or a cricket match, there is no room for doubt who's the winner, because there is an absolute target that you got to improve. So if Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal are playing, there's no judge's perception that comes in, is it? It's just an absolute victory. In a 5-set match, who wins 3 sets is the winner. But in something like a beauty pageant, or in something like World Championship of Public Speaking, there is no absolute target that a speaker reaches to win. It's relative, it's perception driven. On that day, what did those 15 judges see as a better speaker, right? So there are two kinds of competitions, and we are fundamentally into the business of perception in World Championship of Public Speaking, it's not like a tennis match. Now, having said that, the at the core of it is perception. There is bound to be bias. Now you're right, and you thread into a very interesting topic, and I can say things that I don't want to say here and regret later, but there are many examples where speakers have leveraged visibility as a reason to win contests. Now, is it allowed by law? Of course, there is no rule saying that you should be under a rock for 1 year before contesting. You can go make yourself popular, be more visible. But where should the offset for this come from? It should come from, you're right, better judges training programs where you don't use the halo effect or reverse halo effect to judge your competition. I remember, to close this answer, in 2014, Dhananjay and I were both competing in the semifinals in Kuala Lumpur. And that's the year Dhananjay won the competition as well. And I asked Dhananjay, how do you get over biases? Because he had been contesting for 6 years continuously at that point in time. And we were from the same district, so we were very good friends. He said, Aditya, you don't really have control over what the judges do. So the only advice is to be 20% better than the second best in the competition. So even if the judges are biased, buffer in 10% for that, you're still 10% better than the second best. And on that finals in 2014, I could see that in action. Dhananjay was clearly 20% better than any other speaker. So even if there was bias with respect to Dhananjay being a non-native English speaker, even if there was bias that this guy is relatively a little unknown as compared to some other speakers on stage, take away 15% advantage, he's still 5% better than the other. So one way is to create better judges, but as a contestant, asking myself, can I be so good that I'm beyond the scope for bias?
Thank you very much, Aditya and Division K, for this privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya Binod. Thank you to Toastmaster Aditya. Next, we have Toastmaster Ronald Valdez. If you're there, you can unmute yourself and please go ahead with your question.
Hello, good evening. Good evening, Toastmaster Aditya from Baguio City, Philippines. First, I would like to commend the initiative of Division K for spearheading this world-class series, a fresh kind of leadership that District 75 very much needs right now. Second, I would like to commend Toastmaster Rafiq for leading this series, and I think this is a very effective way of learning in the midst of this pandemic. And I would like to thank our speaker, Toastmaster Aditya, for sharing his life experience and his learnings in how to become a powerful world-class speaker. Sir, I would like to know, since we've been talking about biases lately, basically, my question is, how do you process these traditional and contemporary views of what is a great and winning piece should be, and reconcile them in a single speech that not only wins a competition, but moves a people towards something good?
Thanks, Ronald, for that very passionate question. And you're such a passionate audience, all 55 of you. Like when Ronald said, thanks to the division, I could see April do, yay. And so good job, April. And it's such a lovely audience. I wish I had connected to Philippines even earlier. I'm loving this interaction with all of you. So how do you reconcile contradictions? Now, a few days ago, Ronald and all of you, I happened to speak to I live in London, so I happened to speak to a person, a colleague of mine in London, a non-Toastmaster, who has no idea of what Toastmasters is. Now, because of COVID-19 and everything that's going on in the UK now, he was slightly upset mentally, and so he wanted someone to speak to. And I asked him, what have you been doing to keep yourself happy and positive? And he said, I've been watching some videos. And I asked him, oh, what videos have you been watching? He said, Aditya, I've been watching some TEDx videos, I've been watching Les Brown videos. He gave me a list of videos. And there was not a single Toastmaster video in it. And I was asking myself, we have 14,000 clubs around the world, which means we produce 14,000 inspirational speech at a minimum every month. We have World Championship of Public Speaking speeches. Why isn't a non-Toastmaster, when they are feeling down and depressed in their own life, go on YouTube and watch a Toastmaster speech to make themselves feel better, happier, more confident, more relevant? Is there something that we are doing wrong on stage, even at the World Championship, not just at the club? Are we being too self-conscious? Are we being too trophy-driven? So the insight that I have on this one is we sometimes feel that we can be the same person and come up with a new speech that is better the next year. But in truth, we have to become better people, then our speeches would reflect what we have become in that time. So the work needs to be done not just on preparing a better speech. The work needs to be done on, am I becoming a better person emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, mentally? And then the speech that I prepare would be a spillover of what I have already become. Now, we as in Toastmasters manufacture speeches left, right, and center. But sometimes the audience may not see that message in us as people who are able to practice our own messages. Somebody spoke about the power of the mind. If you are speaking about the power of the mind, how powerful is your own mind? If you're speaking about being kind to others, is that available for observation in your own life? So when you become the message, you are the same person on stage and off stage. You're not two different people on stage and off stage. And when you become that same person on stage and off stage, then people truly start becoming inspired by you. So my invitation to all aspirational speeches is, you don't need to become a different person on stage. You got to become a different person off stage, and the spillover of that gets on stage. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Toastmaster Ronald, and thank you, Toastmaster Aditya. Before we go into the next question, I just wanted to acknowledge that among the attendees here today, we also have distinguished Toastmaster Baby Luat. Baby Luat is the mother of Toastmasters in the Philippines. She's attending our session here today. She was there yesterday also. We just wanted to acknowledge her presence. All right, on that note, we have another question. I would like to request Toastmaster Charisma Gatdula. Toastmaster Charisma Gatdula, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself and you can go ahead with your question.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Toastmaster Rafiq. And good evening, Toastmaster Aditya. Charisma from Angeles, Philippines. And my question is, because I am amazed by how you were introduced earlier. You've been a keynote speaker for several events and even have been talking at TED Talks, right? And I'm just wondering, what challenges you're still experiencing, even though you're already a title holder as the 2015 world champion in international speeches? Are you still experiencing challenges, like in writing speeches, or finding what good topics to deliver to the audience, and maybe a few of the best practices you can share with us to keep us motivated and inspired?
Thank you, Charisma. That's a great, lovely question. And also hi to DTM Baby Luat. Thanks for introducing Rafiq. I admire pioneers. The reason I admire pioneers is that When I started Toastmasters 15 years ago in Chennai, we were just one club, which is now a separate district by itself. We were one club. And sometimes when I look back, the seeds that we sowed then gives us a lot of joy. And I'm sure it's the same for Baby Luat. So hello there. And Chrisma, regarding your question, if public speaking or any skill is a journey, not a destination, isn't it? And there's a cliche, I know there's a cliche, but let me tell you what I mean by that. If I have already become a great speaker, then I should be able to say something once and the world should follow it up in action. But we've seen in history of the world that there have been many wonderful speakers, but it doesn't mean the world has changed for the better all the time. We've had prophets, we've had wise men, we've had amazing storytellers. That doesn't mean that the world is a better place today, which means there is a lot more that can be done to become better communicators, to say it in a way that people take action. Now, I might be a great communicator with respect to putting my thoughts in a way that impresses the audience or even allows them to think differently. Now, what I do in my profession, Chrisma, is try to marry this talent with a cause. What is the cause? In my profession, I help individuals, teams, and organizations build their leadership pipeline and strength so that they can create a positive impact on the society. We have had for too many years, organizations ride on the wheel of capitalism and focus only on profits over purpose. So my job is to infuse purpose in these organizations so that they can look beyond just the capitalistic methodologies of making money and contribute to the world in a positive way. Now, how do I do that? With the skills that I've learned in Toastmasters in 15 years, with the skill of public speaking. So when you ask, what else can I do, Chrisma? The answer is it's not just about what else I can do to build the skill. It's about where do I use the skill to create positive impact in the world. Now, each one of you in this call, the 55 of you in this call, including you, Chrisma, has the power of speech. Now you can use that to change lives, or you can use that to continue just doing your Toastmaster projects. The choice is yours. After a point, it's not just about building a skill, it's about where am I using it to create positive impact. And that is something I can do even more, much more than what I'm doing today. And that's never a destination, but always a journey.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster Aditya. It actually gave me clarity on where I want to go to in this journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Toastmaster Charisma, and thank you, Toastmaster Aditya. We now have next question coming from Toastmaster Louisa. Toastmaster Louisa, if you're there, please go ahead.
A pleasant evening to everybody. First of all, I would like to congratulate the organizers of this very successful event. And good evening, Toastmaster Aditya.
Good evening.
How are you feeling?
Doing very well, Louisa. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
You have such a lovely background.
I know. Thank you very, very much for sharing your valuable time with the Philippines. And I hope you can come here someday. Okay, my question to you, sir, is for the benefit of the new contest speakers, kindly share with us the preparations or sacrifices, if any, that has to be done in terms of time and effort to prepare for a winning speech.
Thanks, Louisa, for that question. It starts with the amount that you invest on yourself much before the contest, probably starting today. The more you read, the more you speak to people unlike you, the more you expose yourself to the world in whatever fields or subjects that you're passionate about, the more content that you accumulate, the more knowledge that you accumulate in your mind. And therefore, when you sit down later to write a speech, you just don't need to speak about superficial things. You can speak about things that are deep, that connect with the audience, that are multicultural in nature, because you've invested in yourself to accumulate that wisdom, accumulate that knowledge. So these days, when I speak to mentees or when I coach speakers over Zoom or over Skype internationally, we spend a lot of time not just on that particular speech, because that's just a 5-minute speech that can be created. We focus a lot of time on what kind of hobbies, what kind of reading habits, what kind of knowledge activities can these people imbibe, so that it's not just about this speech that we are solving, it's all the speeches from now to the rest of your life that we are solving for. So some of you may be interested in history, some of you may be interested in psychology, some of you literature, some of you science, management, whatever it is. Can you go a little deeper into those subjects? Can you understand, if you're interested in management, can you understand how organizations make money? If you're interested in history, can you try to draw insights from what's happened in the last 2000 years to how it is relevant to modern day decision making? Now, these kind of reading habits or knowledge accumulation habits is fundamental to be a good speaker, not just in Toastmasters, but in general, a good communicator. It is so seductive to see a speaker who can speak for 3 minutes, but in the 3 minutes, he or she is talking about history, literature, management, poetry, current affairs, Toastmasters. Then you realize, hey, there's something for me to learn from the speaker, not just the fact that he has come with a 3-minute speech, but the fact that there is so much more to him apart from this 3 minutes. I always see my 7-minute speeches, Louisa, as an introduction to me, not the end of who I am, but just the beginning of who I am, so that the audience would later have a more engaging interaction with me. So that's really the fundamental of it. Now, after you've done that, this is the long-term activity, but sometimes we have a speech coming up next day. You can't start reading a book now with a speech coming up next day. So at that time, the way I like to prepare is to ask myself, what is the core message? Like we discussed, am I zooming in and zooming out, considering the audience in mind? That the moment I arrive at a core message, 50% of my work is done. And then it's just about writing a story, opening a document. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you, Toastmaster Louisa. To our audience members, just wanted to inform you that we're coming to the close of the session. I'll take one more question, and then we will have to ask Toastmaster Aditya to address us again with his closing remarks, and we will have to end the session there. All right, I'll take the last question. This one is coming from Toastmaster Vivek. Toastmaster Vivek Tonapi, are you there, sir? If you're there, please unmute yourself and you can go ahead with your question. Toastmaster Vivek Tonapi.
Hi, Aditya, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So my question to you is on the rehearsals part. You spoke about the idea, then the message. Now, how do you rehearse? How many times do you edit? And when you feel that, okay, I'm ready now, this is the final edit. I know you also said that 15 minutes before you change the speech, but you should have a stop, right? So I was keen to know how do you edit and how many rehearsals when you feel that you're satisfied with the preparation. Thank you.
Yeah. Each of us are different, Vivek. So in terms of our own personalities, are we the same? No. But we try to force fit everybody into the same way of preparing for a speech. And therefore it works for some people it doesn't. In truth, we got to find out what works best for us. Now, if I tell you what I do, which I would most gladly say, it may not really work for you. Just like Barack Obama's public speaking style may not work with Trump, and what Trump does may not work with Barack Obama. But to their own followers, each of them are very effective. So you can't really say right or wrong. It's just about their own styles. The way I like to prepare is like what the Japanese do in manufacturing, which is, can I spend more time on the planning phase and less time on the production phase, instead of spending less time on the planning phase and inordinate time on the production phase with defects and rejects and all of that. Now, if you find yourself writing a script which has version 2, version 5, version 20, version 120, version 200, then there is something wrong with the planning phase. And you're spending so much more time on preparing draft after draft. Now, that's what I like to do. I barely have a couple of versions of my speeches. I barely deliver the speech in terms of a live audience, to maximum of once or twice before the World Championship. But I do a lot of preparation by my own. I take a paragraph in my speech and I try to say it out loud. Because if you think about it, and there's a very interesting point, when you write a speech, you're writing to your eye. When you're delivering a speech, you're speaking to the ear. So a lot of us write down our speeches because we're seeing it. So it satisfies the English grammar, it satisfies the punctuation marks. But the form of delivery, the final output, is not a prose, it's to the ear. So the way I like to practice is, before writing down a speech, I would say the idea out loud alone in my room 10 different times, because I'm practicing for the ear. How does it sound? Does it sound good? And the moment I come up with something that sounds good, then I go back and write it down on my document, and not the other way. And therefore, most of the times, once I've done this exercise, the draft that I have invariably is 80% already there. And the 20% is, of course, that extra polish that you add, or the feedback that you get that you incorporate later. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Toastmaster Aditya, and thank you, Toastmaster Vivek. I would also like to acknowledge there was a question by Toastmaster Rika, and then she just replied to me back saying that it was answered by the same answer that you just gave. I would like to thank Toastmaster Rika for that. I will stop the session with one last question, and this question is coming from one of the attendees who asked me to keep the identity anonymous. All right, I'm going to read the question out. The question says, can you please ask Toastmaster Aditya, what are the topics that we should avoid when writing a contest speech, and what topics are a good choice for a contest speech?
All right. So you may want to avoid topics that you know are going to not be logically watertight with the audience. Let me explain what that means. You got to be a little tactical about the way you approach topics. Say if you're talking about cell phones cause cancer. Now, it's a fantastic topic, and you're doing a service to your audience by educating them about technology and radiation and cell phones. However, it's not an established scientific law, scientific discovery that cell phones indeed cause cancer. So there was always going to be somebody in the audience who's going to feel, he's just read one research paper, one article, and making a speech out of it. You're already alienating the audience, not because your intent was wrong, it's because you're saying things that are not inclusive to everybody's point of view. Now, instead of cell phones causes cancer, if you have the same topic, however, what you're trying to tell your audience is being proactive and prevention is better than cure. So we don't know for sure whether it causes cancer, but that doesn't mean we should wait till it causes cancer to then be careful about it. So prevention is better than cure. Now, can anybody disagree that prevention is better than cure? Nobody can disagree prevention is better than cure. So, hey, you've tabbed something from the same topic that is more inclusive for everybody to say yes to. So don't come up with topics where you got to spend inordinate time convincing the audience what you're saying is right, because you have, all you have is 7 minutes. Think of that particular message out of the topic that's going to ensure nobody can say no about that message in your audience. So those are the topics that invariably work in the international speech contest and at the World Championship of Public Speaking. Also ensure in terms of topics you can avoid. If any of your stories or jokes are going to hurt somebody in terms of what they believe in terms of what they feel is right about the world, try to avoid those things, because you may look smart at the end of it, but you don't have the option to go to each member of the audience and ask at the end, I hope you're fine. So you don't know how many people are walking away feeling a little hurt. The majority may love your speech, but the minority's opinions are never heard, isn't it? So try to have jokes or topics that don't necessarily go against the sentiments of other people. You can be provocative, you can foster a debate, healthy debate, but don't go against somebody's value system. That's the overall answer.
Thank you, Toastmaster Aditya, and thank you for the anonymous question coming on from the attendees. All right, I would like to first ask all our attendees to just bear with us for a few more minutes because we need to hear from Toastmaster Aditya with his closing remarks. And let us do that. Toastmaster Aditya, you've been great. The session has been great, and the good news is that I could accommodate every question that was asked during the session. So most of the time it happens that we cannot accommodate and then we say we will get back later. But today, I think it's a successful Q&A session because I accommodated all the questions. And thank you, Toastmaster Aditya, for patiently answering them all. I think this has been a very long Q&A session for you. I hope it has not been exhausting on you though, but I'm sure it has been a bit exhausting on your wisdom. You have given it out, all out to us. Thank you so much for that. On that note, I would like to give the control to you so we can hear a few closing remarks from you, Toastmaster Aditya.
Thank you, Rafiq. It hasn't been exhausting at all. I purposely keep my monologues short so that there can be much more of questions and answers in my session. You know, one of my mentors told me, in fact, it was Balraj who told me, somebody mentioned Balraj. So Balraj was our past international president. And Balraj and I, we grew up in the same district. So Balraj told me, a candle that lights another does not lose its own light. So a candle that lights another does not lose its light. So similar is wisdom. The more you share your knowledge, the more you share your wisdom, it does not diminish your own shine. It does not diminish your own wisdom, but it helps other people. So in that sense, everything that I know, all knowledge I have is there to share. There is nothing proprietary about any of what I said. And I would love to share more in another opportunity later. Now, my closing remarks is very simple. One of the past international presidents once said, you learn in Toastmasters not to just become better at Toastmasters. You learn in Toastmasters to become better outside of Toastmasters. Because Toastmasters is that fail-proof environment that allows you to become better at your work, in your relationships, or in your community, or just in the grace of your conduct, the way you appear to the world. Sometimes I understand, and I totally understand, having been a Toastmaster for 15 years myself, we could fall into the trap of getting caught into Toastmaster designations, whether it be a CCCL pathways, whether it could be area director, division director, district director, and all of that. But remember, we're swimming in a small well of 400,000 people around the world. That's 0.0001% of the global population. Real work needs to be done outside. Real problems need to be solved for outside. There's poverty, there's population, there's climate change, there is inequality, there is religious intolerance. There are so many activities that requires your support as a communicator. I try to embark on that journey in the limited capacity that I have. And I hope you'll join hands because you join Toastmasters to become a better person, better version of yourself outside of Toastmasters. It was lovely to meet and interact with all of you. I really love the vibe and energy that you guys gave me through video. And thank you, Rafiq, for so masterfully moderating this event.
Thank you, Toastmaster Aditya. Lovely having you here, but trust me, we cannot have enough of wisdom from our world champions and our world championship contesting speakers such as yourself. On that note, I would also like to ask our senior member here who's attending. I acknowledged her earlier, Toastmaster Baby Luat, who's the mother of Toastmasters in the Philippines, who'd like to personally congratulate you, Toastmaster Aditya, and thank us. Toastmaster Baby Luat, if you're there, DTM Baby Luat, you can unmute yourself, ma'am.
Hello, do you hear me? Okay. I'd like to personally congratulate you because of the nuggets of wisdom that you have shared with District 75. I saw that you had a fire of enthusiasm and you are so very accommodating. And this is one thing that each and every one of us in Toastmaster needs so much, the caring and the sharing. So much has been learned because of your experience. Being the mother of Philippine Toastmasters, I've been here and the first lady in all of Asia to be accepted. Now the three Toastmasters that asked you question were my babies. They are new Toastmasters, barely almost, Krisha is less than 1 year, and then Tom and Mike are 2 years old Toastmasters, and I am their mentor. Thank you so much for this privilege, and I hope when you come to the Philippines, I can be your personal friend to welcome you and treat you around. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. It'll be my pleasure, Ms. Baby Luat.
Thank you so much, distinguished Toastmaster Baby Luat, for sharing your kind words and your gratitude to all of us. Thank you so much. On that note, once again, thank you, Toastmaster Aditya. My job here is done. I would like to now hand the control back to our Division K Director, Toastmaster Ed. Toastmaster Edrelin, take it over from me. And thank you to all of you. You've been a great audience and great attendees as well. Thank you so much. Back to you, Toastmaster Ed.
Thank you, Toastmaster Rafiq. Thank you, Toastmaster Aditya, for gracing our second episode. It's really an honor and privilege for us here in Division K. Again, fellow Toastmasters, thank you for joining us tonight. This is the second episode. So I would like to invite again everyone for tomorrow's episode, episode 3, which is our speaker will be Muhammad Katani. It will be the same time, 6 p.m. So again, fellow Toastmasters, thank you and hope you have learned what Toastmaster Aditya told us, all the tips, very helpful. Thank you so much for sharing us with that. And I hope these tips will help us in becoming world champion and write a winning speech. So as Division K Director, I officially close this meeting.
Picture session, Toastmaster Ed.
Okay, so now I have officially closed. I would like to request everyone to please open your cameras and let's have a picture. Okay.
Can we have a 1, 2, 3 or something to tell us, TM Ed, that you're taking a picture?
Sorry, I have okay. Ready? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Next batch. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you so much, fellow Toastmasters. See you again tomorrow.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you and congratulations.
Congrats, TMS, Rafik.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Congratulations.